All right, so here we are on the cutting parameter part of the video. So you're going to have a spreadsheet included in the purchase that you made in the file that you received from me. It'll be a separate file from the links to the videos, but included in that is going to be this cut chart that's going to have the cutting parameters for 500 watt, 1000 watt, all the way up to 6000 watt, given the type of material and all that. So we're going to walk through the process of creating our own parameter setup using this as a guide. So let's say we've got this part that we want to cut out of 6mm carbon steel or 1/4 inch thick steel. It's just a simple little bracket. And we've already talked about the tool paths and all that, so I'm not going to show that as part of this. But the next video, I'll walk you through the entire thing. Importing it, set the tool path, set the offset, nest it, cut multiple versions of it, set the cutting parameters up, and we'll show it cutting on the machine, just to do a full walkthrough of the entire process. But for this video, we're going to talk about the cutting parameters. So if you click on well, let me show you the layers. All of these different colors here let you set the layers for the parameter. And so if you highlight it and you click on a layer, you can see that it changes the colors. And you can have all these layers set up with, different colors represent a different type of material. So in other words, green might be 6mm steel, pink might be 10mm steel. So you got a lot of presets where you can just click that color. Once you get your library built of your common colors that you want to cut, or your thicknesses and material types that you want to cut. So that's a part of this layer setup here. And if there's something that you don't want to cut, you want to ignore it, there's a setting for that too. Let's just say that this circle here, the bolt hole, we don't want to cut that. And so if you click on the X right here at the top, you'll see that it turns it white. And so it's going to ignore that and cut the rest of it. But we're going to make that back green again because we do want to cut that. It is. So if you were to uncheck it where you don't want to cut it, then you have to just check it again to turn it back on right here with the little check mark. I don't use that a lot, quite honestly, but it could come in handy for certain things. And I'll explain actually one that I have used it for recently. But so now that you know the colors just give you options for managing your presets, we're going to click on the layer screen and bring up the dialog box here, and we're going to go through the cut chart. I'm going to get this set up where we can see both at the same time and be able to walk through this together. A little bit too small. All right. So I'm going to move that off to the side, and let's see if we can move this. Yeah, we can. So we're going to have to kind of juggle with this a little bit to get you to see what's happening here. So, I've got it on 1000 watt. We'll just go over to 3000 watt just for fun, because I'm going to get a 3000 watt one in the future. If we scroll down to carbon steel, and we've got 6mm here, so thickness 6mm. The cutting speed that it's given us is a range of 90.6 to 98.4. So we're going to come over here and change our cutting speed to, we'll just call it 90 inches a minute. Let me show you one other thing. Let me go back in there. If you at the top here go on global parameters, here is where you set the motion control of your machine. This move speed is basically your rapid speed. You can see it's set for 4,000 inches a minute. Your frame speed, again, you got the frame command that you saw in the other video. That's how fast the frame function's working. The acceleration, your jog acceleration, and all that. But down here, you can actually set your measurements for how you want these displayed. So a common one is meters per second is what a lot of countries will specify this in. And so you could change that to whatever you wanted it to be, but we've got it set to inches per minute for mine, because that's how I like to see it. And so yeah, All right, I just wanted to show you that you had all these global parameters that you can turn on and off, and lots of options here on this global parameter tab. So back on the layer, and if you notice that you see we've got a green layer showing up here. Let me, we talked about the different colors. So let me take this and say that we wanted to cut that at a different speed or something. So I'm going to move that to the pink layer. And when I click back on the layers dialog box, if you notice now I have a pink layer and a green layer available to me to set the parameters for each one. So I'm going to close that out. I'm going to put that back to the green layer so we just have one to deal with. All right, so I'm going to move that back over. And again, we're going to go back to where we were. Carbon steel, 6mm right here, 90 inches a minute. And you see over here, I've changed that to 90 inches a minute. The lift height is basically your cut height. And whatever your chances for tip up are, whatever your, how fast the machine is running, you could set this to a safe setting of, maybe 2 inches. You could set it, to a 1/2 inch, depends on what you're cutting. If you're cutting something that has the potential to tip up pretty high, you would want to set this pretty high. If you're cutting a lot of little bitty fine features out, you could set it, to a very small low number. We're going to leave it at 1 inch lift height. That's how high up it lifts between cuts to wrap it to the next move. Your nozzle height is, your cut height, or standoff as some people call it. I've got that at 0.02 inches. With oxygen, you want to have that at, something like 0.03 to 0.04. You could cut it at 0.02. These are numbers that you can experiment with to see what works well. And there's a range here that can work and would probably not make a noticeable difference. 0.02 to 0.04 for this setting doesn't make a noticeable difference. Now, the gas type here, I don't have as a drop down because I'm using this evaluation copy of SipCut, and they've got all that grayed out. When we get to the machine to actually cut this job, I'm going to show it to you on the screen. Again, screenshot of a screenshot. It's not going to be as pretty. You're going to get a better look at it here for what we're doing. But you can select here the gas type, either nitrogen or oxygen. And for this, we would want to set oxygen, and then we would set our pressure here for what we want to cut at. And then, we want to set the peak power. Again, if this was not, this is defaulted to 1,000 watts, we would drop that down and say, 1/4 inch material, we're probably going to cut that at close to 3,000 watts on a 3 kilowatt machine. Duty cycle, same thing, maybe between 90 and 100% on duty cycle. Frequency, between 3 and 4,000 is typical on carbon steel. And on, let's see, we could just make this 4,000 right here. The focus point, let's bring back up our settings, and you see that we have a parameter for focus in 6mm. It's saying, 4.5 to 5.5, and that actually is, it doesn't say it, but it's actually millimeters. So on that, I'm going to make this and this is a positive number, 0.2 as a starting point. The delay time is from the time that it actually, in the case of pierces, once it's all the way through, or if there isn't a pierce specified in thinner material, that's, how long it delays. And I have been instructed that running a delay time of at least 200 milliseconds will help protect your lower lens from getting contaminated. And I have actually found that to be the case. So once you have done all that, we can click the save button here, and we can actually save this as I'm going to call it, 6mm O2 for oxygen. And we know we're going to cut that with a 3.0mm nozzle, and just leave it at that. So we can save that. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to open it back up so we can look at it. So we saved that. Now if we wanted to open it again, you can see we have that now as an option, these FSM files. And what you're going to get when you purchase this video series, if we go to the F drive, which is a thumb drive, you can see all the different ones I've created for my 1000 watt machine, and you could pick any of those and pull them in and keep saving them, keep updating them. If you find a new parameter that's working better, you can rename it, and keep naming them, with later versions. But this will give you a starting point. And after that, you can tweak around with the cut speed. You can tweak around with the focus setting, was another one, and move on from there. So I'm going to click the Pierce tab. And for thinner materials, again, depending on the cutting speed of the machine, the power of the machine, like let's just say for example, my 1000 watt machine, I can cut up to 16 gauge metal with no pierce. When it starts to cut, it doesn't need an extra piercing delay to work effectively. When we get out to the machine, I'm going to show you this in more detail. And in fact, I'm going to have a dedicated separate video later on that you can see the complicated area of piercing in thick materials, for a given machine type. But that just walks you through the layer parameters and the basics of it. And the other thing that you can do is turn on this dynamic power adjust. And we can edit this curve here with any number of things that we may want to change about it. And all this is really doing is saying that if the machine is slowing down for a corner, we're going to dynamically adjust the corner power down to a lower setting so that we keep it in line with what the cutting speed is. And the way you edit the curve is you just click on curve edit here, and you can make this whatever you want. So if the speed is running at 50% of its speed, we can say that it's running at 50% power. You could start it down as low as 10% speed and 20%, 30% power, and you could put points all along this line. You could put another one at 50% and 50% power. And then add another one. You can keep adding them in here and say at 80% speed, we want 80% power to give it more of a linear look, depending on what look you're going to. So you have lots of dynamics, and you can copy the same curve to the frequency setting so that it would be adjusting the frequency along with the power of this. So if we click OK on that, you see now we have our dynamic power adjust, and the frequency setting right there would also be adjusted in that way. So you got a few things here. You got this defilm command, and it gives you another layer where you can run a quick cut to cut your film loose. If you have material that has film on it, like stainless steel or aluminum that comes with a foil stick-on film, so you can use that. Some of these things I've not gotten that familiar with. You could turn the gas on or off for a given cut, maybe if you're engraving or something. And then here's a couple of parameters that are helpful. I've used these quite a bit. The slow lead is where you can, sometimes in thicker material, the lead will sort of be funny. It'll not be cutting very well at the beginning. So you can say, if we're going to have our cut speed at 50 inches a minute, we could say the beginning of our lead we want to cut at 50 inches a minute. I'm sorry, our overall cut speed is going to be 90 inches a minute. So we could say on the slow lead for the first, the length there. Let's say we have a 1/4 inch lead in. We could say for the first, 0.125 of the lead in, we want to cut at 50 inches a minute. And you could do the same on the stop. When it's getting close to the stop, how far toward the end and how fast do you want it to be cutting at the stop? The slow lead I've definitely used. I don't really know the place for a slow stop, but it's there if you need it. So slow lead, good idea to use. So that is the basics of setting up your parameters, loading in the parameters, using the cut chart that's coming with the machine. And then, from there, we're going to get out on the machine in a little bit and show you some real time, how to pull these in, how to set them, how to tweak them, what to look for, what to adjust, all those kinds of things. So that'll wrap up this video.